What are all the different construction procurement routes? In this video, we're going to explore all the different ways a project developer or owner can engage a construction contractor. Whether you work for a project developer, a general contractor, or a subcontractor, understanding the different construction procurement routes, also referred to as project delivery methods, will help improve your contract management. So in this video, you'll understand all the different procurement routes and why these different routes are chosen. So let's get started. The forms we're going to be talking about are managing contractor, alliance, early contractor involvement, construct only or traditional procurement, design and construct, engineer, procure, construct, and public-private partnerships. So for each of these models, we're going to talk about, give it a description, so talk about what the model is, the uses, the stages of engagement for the different parties, the cost structure and risk transfer, the time risk, and the pros and cons. So why would a project developer choose this specific model? And within each of these models, the key thing we're going to look at is the structure of how all the different parties are engaged and who engages who. So the parties involved in any project delivery will be the project owner or developer, the head or general contractor, trade and subcontractors, and architects or engineers. Now, for any project, the project developer is going to be the one choosing the best project delivery model for them. So they're the one financing and developing the project. So they need to choose a project model that best suits their project objectives. The factors they're going to consider are the project timing, so how quickly they need to deliver the project, what stage they need input from different parties, the specific scope of the project, how well understood the scope is and what the risks are, and their own ownership and their own resources. So how capable are they of taking ownership and delivering a project like this? Okay, so the first model we're looking at is the managing contractor model. So the managing contractor model is where the head contractor manages all of the subcontractors and designers on behalf of the owner. It looks similar to a design and construct model, but the key difference is the project developer is taking the cost, time, and performance risk, and the head or general contractor is more or less working as a consultant. The managing contractor model is used when projects are uncertain, complex, or particularly very big. So you see it on major oil and gas or mining projects where the developer will engage a specialist contracting firm like Bechtel or Fluor to manage the overall project for them. The general contractors engaged early on, so in the feasibility and early concept design stage where their constructability input and project delivery input is needed. The general contractor will generally quote a fixed fee for the project management services, but then all of the construction costs or the subcontract cost, design cost are charged at cost plus. Generally, the margin will be a lot smaller than a lump sum project. So it might only be between 2 to 4%. And they'll take some performance risk. So they might have some incentive fee if the project's finished on time. But ultimately, the completion date and time risk sits with the project owner. So why would a developer choose this model? Well, the early contractor involvement gets the contractor involved in the design and feasibility of the project. So you get their expertise and construction input early on. The owner and the contractor can work together. So it's very collaborative, and the owner still retains a lot of control, so he can easily change things later on. It's also fast, so they can engage a contractor relatively quickly. The cons is that the owner will hold the cost and time risk. So there's a more uncertainty and risk for the owner. It's not transferred to a contractor, and they can't select a contractor based on price competition. So they're not leveraging price competition in the market to choose a contractor. They're choosing them based on their skills and expertise. A similar model to managing contractor that's structured slightly different is the alliance or relationship contracting model. This is where the owner, the head contractor, and the designer form a team to deliver the project. So they form an integrated project team, and then they manage the trade and subcontractors together. So this model is used in uncertain, complex environments where there's extensive input needed from the designer. So the designer isn't treated as another subcontractor or third party, they're part of the project team. And generally these are done when there's a program of works, because there's quite a significant setup cost to this model. So for example, the level crossing removals were all delivered with an alliance structure where the project owner, the designer, and the head contractor formed an integrated team to manage a program of works. Contractor and designer are engaged early on in the feasibility and planning phase, and the team work together to develop a budget and then stick to this budget. So it's similar to a lump sum project, except the team work together to form this budget, and team take on the schedule performance risk. So this integrated project team take on the completion date. So with the alliance and relationship contracting model, you get the benefits of getting the contractor and the designer involved early on. The owner can retain a lot of control because they're part of the project team, so are very involved in any change management. Because the team is forming the design together, you get a lot of option analysis and best for project decisions. It's collaborative. And once the team is set up, it's relatively fast, but there is a bit of a time component to setting up an integrated project team. So the negatives. There's increased time and cost risk for the project owner. They're not purely transferring this in a lump sum basis. So there's more uncertainty. And when they're choosing the contractor and the designer, they're not leveraging market competition. However, once it comes to the actual procurement of the subcontractors to manage the works, because they're part of the team, they get full visibility of the cost and they can be involved in receiving benefits from any buying or procurement gains through construction. The next model is early contractor involvement. So early contractor involvement is a two-stage process. So in the first stage, the project owner and the contractor get together to develop the project scope, the concept design, and feasibility. There's a second stage where the owner then issues this to the market as a design and construct or EPC contract, engages the head constructor for the detailed design and the construction services. This second stage may be competitive or it may not. So you can have a competitive ECI process where the contractors engage to develop the concept design, but then they have to tender the work competitively, or you could have a non-competitive process where you do the initial concept design with the input of the contractor, then they give a lump sum fixed fee to deliver the works as a design and construct model. So you see this model a lot in the renewable energy industry where you have a two-stage ECI for, say, building a solar farm where the owner knows they need a solar farm, they need a certain capacity, they want it to connect to the grid by a certain date, but they don't know what materials to use, exactly how long it's going to take, how much everything is going to cost. So they engage in the services of a contractor to work this all out for them. And once they've got the design to a certain stage, they've decided to proceed with the project, they've done their final investment decision, they'll then issue an EPC contract where the contractor submits a lump sum quote. So they get the benefits of the contractor involvement early on to refine the project and get involvement into their final investment decision. So the contractor is almost used as a consultant in stage one before then moving to an EPC contract. So in terms of cost and time risk, well, it's in two stages. In the early stage, the contractor is taking no cost or time risk. It all sits with the owner. In the second stage, all the time, contract completion, lump sum cost is all transferred to the contractor. Okay, so pros and cons. The pros, you get the involvement of the contractor early on, and the risk is transferred to the contractor in the second stage. The negatives, it's a longer process, but for a lot of these projects where you need the contractor involvement for the feasibility study and concept design, there's generally some investment decision process. So the overall process is much longer. And then depending on the type of ECI model you do, you might not get price competition in the second stage. So if the owner managed the design themselves and issued it to 3 to 6 contractors on a lump sum basis, you'd get price competition between the contractors. But if you do it ECI, where you're going exclusively to the contractor who helped you in the initial stage, you don't get price competition. The next model is a construct-only model, which is known as a traditional procurement REIT, also known as design, bid, build, because the owner performs the design, they engage an architect, they then prepare a tender, a scope of works, a set of drawings to get lump sum fixed fee quotes from contractors who then manage subcontractors performing the work. So design, bid, build, or traditional procurement is the way that a general contractor will always engage subcontractors. So general contractors will complete the design themselves, then engage subcontractors with an issue for construction design. So it's a construct-only package where the contractor has no design responsibility. Construct-only packages are used for simple, straightforward projects, and they require significant owner expertise. So the owner has to be able to manage the design, capture any value engineering opportunities, prepare a detailed scope of works and package, And then once the design gets to the issue of construction stage, issue this to contractors to quote. So in terms of risk transfer, all the cost and time risk is transferred to the contractor, but importantly, because the owner has completed the design themselves, all of the design risk is with the owner. Any change to the drawings or specifications will be a variation to the contractor. Okay, so let's talk about the pros and cons of this model. So the pros, you get the benefits of getting a competitive tender, so you get the full benefits of market competition to get the lowest cost, and all the risk is transferred to the contractor. Well, not all the risk, just time and cost risk. The negatives is that the design risk sits with the owner. Any mistakes in the design, any omissions, it's all with the owner. You need an experienced owner to manage this, a project developer who's got a lot of experience managing projects, preparing tenders, tender assessments, and then managing the contractor. You lose all control once you issue a contract. Change becomes very expensive and disruptive, requires a longer process because you're taking the design to IFC, then doing your procurement, then awarding a contract before you can start works. And it's not a collaborative process. It's a very contractual, winner takes all form of contract. It doesn't inspire competition between the owner and the contractor. A design and construct model is where it's similar to construct only, but the contractor or the general contractor is completing the detailed design. So the owner will complete the concept design and feasibility, decide what they want, take the drawings to an initial 15% or 30% design. Then they'll engage a contractor to do the detailed design and construction. This is done when the scope is well understood, but you need the expertise of the contractor to complete the detailed design, and there's opportunities for the contractor to value engineer. The project is awarded post-concept or 15% design. The cost risk is transferred to the contractor as well as the time risk. So in terms of pros and cons of this model, the pros, you get a competitive tender. You can get 3 to 6 quotes and go with the lowest cost, best value for money contractor. All the risk is transferred to the contractor. Importantly, the detailed design risk. The negatives though is once the contract's awarded, you lose all control. Change, particularly in a design and construct model, is incredibly expensive and disruptive, particularly if there's some issue with the concept design, can be incredibly disruptive. You need a very clear project scope, and then the model is similar to construct only. It's fundamentally adversarial, particularly almost more so than construct only because the design responsibility is transferred to the contractor. Okay, so the next model is an engineer, procure, and construct contract. This is where the project owner specifies a specific output they want for a system. For example, they want a solar farm that produces 100 megawatts of electricity, or they want a water treatment plant that processes a certain amount of water per day. They're specifying the performance requirements. The contractor is then responsible for the concept design, the detailed design, and construction to achieve this output. So it's completely a turnkey contract. The contractor is responsible for meeting the performance requirements, and there's typically some sort of performance guarantee that goes along with this. So they're also taking on additional operations risk. So you see EPC projects a lot in process infrastructure, renewable energy, utility type projects. They're greenfield projects with specific performance requirements. So they're generally completely new projects where there's some sort of easy to measure performance guarantee like electricity produced. They're awarded post the feasibility stage. So the project owner will do their investment decisions, decide whether they want to proceed with the project, whether it makes financial sense. And then the concept design, choosing the equipment, the specifications, everything is with the contractor. So in terms of risk, in terms of the actual construction risk, cost and time completely sits with the contractor. But with an EPC contract, importantly, performance risk also sits with the contractor. The contractor is warranting that the solar farm can produce 100 megawatts. They're taking on a performance guarantee. With EPC contracts, you're leveraging competition between the market. The important point here is typically with big EPC contracts, because there's so much risk associated with them, they're such large projects that in a lot of ways you actually reduce the amount of competition because there's often very few companies in the market who will take on these sort of risks. Okay, so in terms of pros and cons for the owner, you get competitive tender between contractors, assuming there's enough contractors in the market. The risk is completely transferred to the contractor. including both the design and the performance risk, and there's very limited owner involvement needed. The owner has outsourced everything to the contractor. They more or less don't need to do anything. The negatives is you get complete loss of control. Any changes will be incredibly costly and disruptive. You need a very clear project scope and defined performance requirements. And then this is one of the most adversarial project models because all the risk is with the contractor and the owner can pretty much argue anything should be part of the project scope. So it's very adversarial and contractors take on a lot of risk. So the final contract model I'll talk about are public-private partnerships, which is the highest risk form of model for a contractor. So in this model, special purpose vehicle or a new company will be formed that's a collaboration between a bank, a general contractor, and an O&M team. And then basically they'll finance, design, procure, construct, and then operate and maintain whatever they build for 25 years. So you see this quite often in major infrastructure projects like road or rail tunnels. But this company is doing everything. They're designing, financing, constructing, and building the project. And then the project owner, typically some sort of state government, just slowly pays this off over 25 years. So there's a huge amount of risk with the project team. Okay, so I'll just briefly finish off by talking generally about how all these different project delivery methods compare. So if we look at this model, we can basically rank all of these different project delivery methods or construction procurement routes in terms of increased risk and responsibility for the contractor at the top, and then at the lowest end, the highest amount of owner control, but increased risk for the project owner. So at the top end, you have the most risk and responsibility for the contractor, but also the highest impact of any change, the highest cost of any change. And on the lower end of the scale, you have the most ownership and control with the project owner, but also the most risk. So at the top, you've got a PPP. The contractor is taking on responsibility for everything from financing to operating and maintaining it for 25 years. But if the owner changes anything, they want one additional light, there will be a huge additional cost to that because the contractor is then not quoting competitively to say they've got to maintain it, they've got to procure it, they've got to allow for the design, they've got to allow for the initial financing costs. So there's a huge cost of any change. Managing contractor model, the owner is taking all the cost and time risk, but it's easy for them to change things. They can add things in and all they're paying is the true cost of doing the work. So you can see PPP at the top end, everything's transferred to the contractor, but there's a huge cost of any change. And on the bottom end, you've got managing contractor and alliance type contracts where the owner can quickly and easily change things so they're best suited to complex, uncertain projects.